Please have a seat. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Welcome to the session. It is both a pleasure and a novelty for me to be here today, to be moderating this session, to be the griller, not the grilled. But don't worry, I know what it's like to be a panelist, so I'll be very gentle with you. We're here today to talk about activism. We're here to talk about charity, about civic engagement and philanthropy. Topics that are very important to all of us, because no matter where we sit, where we come from, there's always someone either across the street from us or on the other side of town or across the border who could use a helping hand. But the question is, does this helping hand come in the form of a handout, i.e. charity, or does it come in the form of a hand to help them along, to help them up, i.e. civic engagement? And charity is something that our region knows all too well, being the birthplace of the three monotheistic religions, which place the act of compassionate giving to the needy at the very core. But as you know, handouts are not sustainable. Our world needs more than that. We need engaged giving, up close and personal. Because true community is all about togetherness. It's about collective responsibility. It's about joint action. One hand cannot lift society, but many hands can help raise it. So for example, corporate executives going and reaching out to municipal village councillors, for example, beauty companies promoting healthy lifestyles, working women investing some of their time and talent in mentoring girls in impoverished areas, all that is civic engagement. All that is about more active giving. Now, today with our panelists, we want to examine the landscape of philanthropy in the Arab world, see where it is, see where we can take it from here. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Dr. Barbara Ibrahim, the director of the H.R.H. Center for Philanthropy and Civic Engagement at the American University in Cairo. I'll start with His Royal Highness Prince Turki Faisal. Many of you know him as a diplomat, but he's also one of the founders of the King Faisal Foundation. We have Mr. Fadi Ghandour, co-chair of the WEF Middle East and CEO of Aramex International. Carly Fiorina, former CEO of HP and founder of the Fiorina Foundation. And finally, H.R.H, deputy CEO of the Emirates Foundation. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Now, I'd like to conduct this in a conversational, casual manner, so please, at any moment, if you feel like jumping in to make a comment, to ask a question, please feel free to do so. I think we'll start off with just talking about philanthropy in general and trying to clarify some issues to our audience. Now, I'll start with you, Carly. Over the last 10 years, I think we've seen the whole field of philanthropy really blossom from a concept to very much a practice in many companies and in civil society. We've seen the launch of many campaigns, such as the one I'm wearing the T-shirt for, the Red Campaign. Why do you think this has happened? Is this as a result of just excess wealth, or is there a change in global attitudes and the global value system?
Well, certainly I would like to believe the latter. And I think there is, on many people's parts and many institutions' parts, a growing realization that a global world is an interdependent world. And therefore, what happens in one part of the world actually affects us elsewhere. Certainly, I know that as the chairman and CEO of a very large technology company, Hewlett-Packard, I believed very strongly that it was in our enlightened self-interest to be involved in building communities and building capacity, because as a company that operated in 156 countries around the world, we knew that if we were helping to provide a helping hand, as you put it, we were also creating employees of the future and customers of the future and partners of the future. It is true that there has been a tremendous amount of wealth created in the last 10 years. And I believe as recently as just a couple of weeks ago, it was reported that there are 950 individuals who collectively have amassed trillions of dollars of personal wealth and now are at a point where they can begin to give back. Certainly, now that I am involved as a private citizen in giving back, I can say that it is the part of my life that gives me the most satisfaction and the most pleasure. So I think it is all of those things. I hope business is more enlightened in its view about its requirement to be a part of the communities in which it plays a role. I hope that people increasingly are aware that interdependence means we all are impacted by the fortune or misfortune of those around us. And I do think there is more individual wealth.
And you said that there is a strategic interest, so it wasn't just a matter of you doing this out of charity, not just out of compassion, but out of a realization that your own corporation stands to benefit, because being sensitive to your political and social landscape also affects your bottom line. Has it affected the bottom line, do you think, the kind of charity work that you did at your corporation?
Certainly, I think it does. I think it requires, however, a company to take a view that is a bit longer than a quarter or a year. Mm-hmm. I think there's no denying that if we think about the world in which an individual or in which a company operates mm-hmm. over a multi-year period, mm-hmm. that communities that are growing and vibrant are also communities that are more peaceful. Mm-hmm. They are communities where future employees or future partners can come mm-hmm. from. So yes, I think it is in a company's
and also being
self-care.
sensitive to your environment creates probably opportunities for you in terms of how
Absolutely.
you
His Majesty and Your Majesty were very forward-looking in creating the Jordan Education Initiative here in Jordan, a great example of a public-private partnership, something that Hewlett-Packard was honored to participate in. Mm-hmm. But out of that initiative has not only come more educated people, there's also come great opportunities mm-hmm. for the companies that have been involved in that effort.
We'll pick up on the opportunities later on. But before we continue, Barbara, could we just make it very clear to the audience the distinction between charity and philanthropy?
Sure.
Civic engagement?
Charity is obviously a very well-known part of human generosity in our part of the world. Some would say that it originated here. But usually charity is limited to meeting the immediate needs of the disadvantaged. So you could think of it in a way as consumables. Food, medicine, clothing, blankets, things that will be gone in a very short time, and people will be hungry again. Whereas I like to think of a continuum that goes to change. So we might move from charity to thinking about development, and this is the old idea of not giving the man a fish, but giving him the pole to fish. We could take this idea, though, I think even further along the continuum and think about transforming societies, addressing issues of inequality and injustice, and the kind of reforms that are needed to make them the societies that we all would like them to be. And that's going to require strategic philanthropy, thinking about scale, and looking at the origins of our problems and tackling them at their root instead of placing Band-Aids on top of them.
Charity strikes me as reducing just symptoms of distress, whereas philanthropy is more about finding solutions to the underlying problems. So it's more of a long-term approach, more of a sustainable approach.
And we have wonderful examples throughout the Third World. The Nobel laureate, Muhammad Yunus, wanted to stabilize incomes for the poorest people in Bangladesh, and he found a mechanism that he could take to scale that was simple enough that it could be replicated broadly, that caught the imagination and the attention of his own society and then later on of the world. And in Egypt today, there's an organization that has 40,000 youth volunteers who are serving in their own communities, finding a way to ameliorate local problems. And so it's scale.
Well,
lot
we
of
have an
it's about
example here at home with Aramex, Mr. Fadi Ghandour and his project in Nadif. We have a short video here just to show you visually what this project is all about.
صباح الخير يا اسطاطية.
فقلنا القطاع الخاص له دور تنموي كبير، وبيقدر يجي يتبنى هذه المجتمعات وينتقل من مجتمع إلى آخر عبر المملكة.
بدينا بدعم لشركة واحدة اللي هي شركة أرامكس، دعمت مشروع في جبل النظيف.
ودك بينده كوكو كوكو.
المبدأ الأساسي تبعها أنه نحن مش رح نقرر شو أولويات الجبل، أهل الجبل وأهل المنطقة هم اللي بيقرروا شو أولوياتهم.
بخفض محتاجين بهالجبل،
محتاجين لمكتب إن شاء الله نتعلم فيها يعني ونعلم الأطفال كمان منها.
يعني جبل نظيف يقارب ما فوق 100,000 عدد سكان في جبل نظيف، ما في متنفسات وما في مكان للعب للطلاب، وبنعاني من قلة النظافة وقلة الحاويات، يعني هذه برضو من المشاكل الرئيسية في الجبل.
بدينا بالأمور الظاهرة، يعني الأمور اللي قدرنا نشوف إنه فيها مشاكل. مثلا شفنا المدرسة وحسينا إنه المدرسة بدها ترميم لأنه في أشياء واضحة، الشبابيك مكسرة، ما في حديد على الشباك، ما في سياج حول المدرسة. الأولاد الأكبر، هاي مدرسة ابتدائية، فالأولاد الأكبر بنطوا على السور بداية والأولاد الصغار.
يعني عرفت إنه راح يظبطوا مدرسة آدكا، يعني حطوا لها شبابيك وضوء عشان ما كانش الضوء مناح، كانوا كل يوم يركبوا لها ضوء، وحطوا لها كهرباء منيحة. بعدين دهنوها.
ما بصدق لحد ما اشوف يعني.
طبعا جلسة الإصغاء نحن بنسمع للقصة، وبعد ما نخلص قراءة القصة
فكرنا كتير، وفكرنا أول نعمل مشروع فني أو كذا. بالنهاية طلعت الفكرة اللي هي انعملت بمحلات تانية بالعالم، إنه خلي الأولاد يصوروا صور من محيطهم، وهاي الصور تعكس لنا إحنا كيف حياتهم، شو الأشياء الحلوة وشو الأشياء السلبية اللي موجودة بحياتهم.
شو استفدت من ورشة العمل؟ انبسطت فيها؟ شو أحلى شيء كان؟
يعني الرسم.
أعطيناهم الكاميرات على التنتين بعد الظهر، يوم كان يوم 4، ويوم الخميس على الساعة 8 الصبح أخذنا منهم الأفلام.
حصلت على منحة دراسية من المؤسسة العربية للتنمية المستدامة من صندوق مصعب خورمة.
أنا اسمي فراس إبراهيم محمد إبراهيم، بدرس الجامعة.
هذه المؤسسة يعني قدمت لي كثير يعني تسهيلات بمجال تعلمي، فالمؤسسة العربية للتنمية المستدامة فعلا قدمت لي تسهيلات كبيرة. يعني أنا كنت نفسي وأهلي ما كانوا يعني متوقعين انهم يدعموني 100% يعني.
طوعت هون بالمؤسسة قبل 6 أشهر. استفدت انه كيف اكون اعمل مع روح الجماعة، وكيف التعاون بيننا وبين بعض، كيف اكون قيادية للمجموعة اللي انا فيها.
هي بمقابل يعني الجهد اللي عم بتعبوه معنا، العمل التطوعي كتير قليل صفى، فاحنا والعمل هذا التطوعي لخدمتنا وخدمة افرادنا ومجتمعنا ووطننا، وطبعا بالتالي يعني منطقتنا اللي احنا عايشين فيها.
كانت أول مرة باخذ ورشة عمل، كانت أول مرة بحس إنه في تفكير. استفدنا كثير من آراء اللي انعرضت في هاي الورشة. الواحد توسعت آفاقه أكثر، صار يفكر بشغلات تانية أكثر من كان أول. كثير كانت مفيدة لنا.
شيء فريق مطلقنا، ما في شيء اسمه فريق الصراحة، ولا فريق ضمن عاداتنا، ضمن ديننا، ضمن إسلامنا. بس يمكن الورشة هاي كثير كان حطت لي كثير أساسيات ما كانت موجودة عندي. يمكن أعطتني شوي كمان قوة شخصية ما أخذتها من الجامعة، ما أخذتها من قبل، من دراستي قبل.
كان التفاعل كتير كبير، وكان في تواصل كتير كبير باللغة وبالتعبير. اشتغلوا بمجموعات، سمعوا بعض، تحديتهم بكتير أسئلة، وبعتقد انه اجتزت معاهم الحد الاول من حدود اطلاق حرية التفكير بالمعنى الحقيقي، لاني اعلنت بنهاية الورشة انه الهدف هو في الحقيقة انه نبدأ نطلع على المسلمات ونبدأ نحكي فيها.
انا مبسوطة كتير وبحب كتير المكتبة.
مركز المؤسسة راح يكون بجبل النظيف، فنحن مش جايين من عمان الغربية ولا جايين من أي مكان آخر. مركزنا في الجبل لحتى نضلنا دائما مع أهل الجبل بهمومهم وبقضاياهم. سوف نجد ونسعى للذهاب إلى مجتمعات محلية أخرى، لكن عملنا دائم. فنحن أهمنا مش بس إنه نحن نشتغل من خارج الجبل في الجبل، علينا تمكين أهل الجبل، تنظيم أهل الجبل لدائما طرح قضاياهم. بنفس الوقت بقضية بشكل موازي بنكون موجودين في مناطق أخرى في المملكة إن شاء الله.
والله مارينا مارينا
Now, Fadi, over the years, Aramex has been involved in many charitable causes, and I know has sponsored many events and given many donations to good causes. What made you decide to personally and actively get involved in carrying out a project such as this, as opposed to just giving a donation to a specialist organization?
Thank you, Your Majesty. I need to start by saying this is really a private sector initiative. It started with Aramex. We took it and we incubated it, and it was part of our giving back in terms of being much more activist than looking at it as charity. You know, at the end of the day, charity is for us to feel good and go to sleep and feel comfortable sleeping. But this is a story of the private sector and entrepreneurs reclaiming or claiming their role in development in the societies that we live in. We are making a statement that the future of our region or wherever we live in has to be decided by us also, and sitting on the table and going out and actually putting our money where our mouth is. The private sector has been doing extremely well. It tends to complain a lot. It tends to blame government a lot for being absent. Well, government can be absent, it's their problem. It doesn't mean that we're going to sit around and wait for development to happen by somebody else. This is a story of actually entrepreneurs, and it's not Aramex, by the way, it's called Ruwad Tanmiya, or Entrepreneurs for Development, and us basically making a statement. A lot of people said, why do you want to fix a school? By the way, the school you saw here is a government school. It's run and operated by government. We're already fixing 6 schools now in that community. So we came into that community and adopted it completely, and are looking at it as in a holistic approach to development. So it is not charity. It is not just giving these guys. The people that you see in here that got the scholarships, we have about 200 people now, and a couple of them we will probably hear from them later. Fantastic people. And
actually,
we gave...
Why don't we hear from them now? We have Muhammad and Sharihan.
Sharihan and Muhammad are 2 of our...
We'd love to hear from you.
Can you stand up, please? And they'll tell their story.
حابين بس نسمع منكم. محمد، أنت كنت عم بتشارك وعملت تطوع بالجبل. ممكن تحكي لنا شوي عن تجربتك؟
أول شيء بعرف عن اسمي محمد نظام عبد القادر النصر، متطوع في المؤسسة العربية للتنمية المستدامة، سنة ثانية تمريض في جامعة الزرقاء. طبعا أول شيء يعني كعمل تطوع هو شيء بيظهر من داخل الإنسان، مش إنه واحد بيجبره عليه، لأنه شو ما في عنا إحنا من طاقات، من هوايات، بنحب إيش إنه إحنا نظهرها. بس الأهم من هيك إنه كان بدنا مؤسسة، كان بدنا مكان او بيت انه يدعمنا ويعطينا هاي الامور. فوجدت المؤسسه عربيه انه خير بيت وخير مكان، لانه استطعت اني اظهر هواياتي واظهر اسلوبي عن طريق قيام بورشات عمل للاطفال.
كان دور بالقراءه مزبوط،
مش مثلا اعطاهم نوع من المهارات، نوع من التميز، مثل كتابه قصص باسلوب حر، كتابه يوميات. هاي الشغلات كمان كان بعيد عن دور كاني معلم، بعيد عن دور المدرسه، نوع انه بحس فيه بتميز، بحس فيه بدور انه هو مثلا بيقدر يكتب اي شيء.
بس انت ليش تعمل هاي الشغله؟ شو شعورك انت لما بتعمل هذا الشغل؟
اول شيء انا مش يعني انا بحب اعمل هاي الشغله. ليش؟ لانه لقيت انه يعني انا بدي افيد المجتمع. اول شيء لانه في عندي طاقات زي هيك، ليش ما افيد المجتمع فيها؟ شغله ثانيه انه يعني شيء حلو هيك، شيء انساني، انه مثلا واحد يعمل مع اطفال صغار ممكن يستفيد منهم، وهو كمان ممكن انه يفيد، ما بضر. شغله ثانيه يعني انا من طريقه عملي انه عملنا يعني ورش عمل، فدنا الاطفال باللغه، قويناهم في كتابه القصص، كتابه اليوميات، كتابه فحس الطفل انه هو يعني فعلا في حدا مهتم، يعني غير انه دور المدرسه، غير انه دور مثلا بجوز المدرسه تكون نوع من الملل، فاحنا بعيد عن جو الدراسه.
فانت حسيت انك انت عملت كمان فرق بحياه الاطفال هذول؟
اكيد.
وسمعت انه حصلت على بعثه
منحه منحه دراسيه خلتني اكمل دراستي في الجامعه.
في جامعه؟
منحه I'd like to add انه المنحه هي باسم مصعب خرمة، هو احد شهداء التفجيرات الارهابيه اللي صارت في الاردن في شهر 11 سنه 2006 5. فنحن احدى الطرق لان نرد على هذه العمليات الارهابيه ان نعطي الى المجتمع بطريقه ايجابيه وليس بطريقه انتقاميه. فنحن كنا ايجابيين. It's part of our giving back in terms of development and letting people feel that there is hope at the end of the day, and that there are people from both sides that care and are willing to put their necks out and make sure that they are invested in the community that they live in.
نسمع منك كمان عن تجربتك بالجبل.
أول شيء اسمي شريهان منصور وبدرس حقوق، طبعا أنا سنة ثالثة. بدايتي مع المؤسسة كانت تطوعية بحتة. كان هدفنا إنه نرتقي بجبل النظيف كجبل منزوي، مثلا بجوز ناس كتير في الأردن ما بيعرفوا، أو مثلا قضيته مش معروف كتير، أجواءه الأطفال الموجودين فيه. طبعا كانت الفكرة موجودة في أذهان أي شاب أردني إنه يقوم بتطوير الأردن بفضل جلالة سيدنا أبو حسين وستنا أم حسين. يعني كان إنه عندنا هدف من الأول، بس كان بدنا حدا يشجعنا، إنه حدا مثلا يحكي لنا إنه مثلا هينا وراكم انتوا، يعني اعملوا هذا الشيء واحنا معاكم. كانت بداية المؤسسة انها هي شجعتنا انه نعمل اعمال تطوعية مع الاطفال. كان الشباب في جبل نظيف عندهم حاجز انه ما بدنا نحكي، ما عندهم اي حوار. مثلا تيجي تحكي معهم بيقولك لا احنا معلش ما بدنا نحكي، ما بدنا نطلع.
ليه ما بدهم يحكوا؟
كان عندهم حاجز انهم مش متعودين على هذا الشيء، انه الدراسة مش متوفرت لهم كلهم، فكان عندهم حاجز بالحوار. فاجت طبعا المؤسسه كسرت هذا الحاجز بشكل كبير بالنسبه لجميع الفتيات قبل الشباب. طبعا صار في عندنا تطور كتير كبير للمرأة، انه تحس انها لها دور فعال في المجتمع، انها من حقها تدرس. واجت المنح كمان للطلاب حتى انهم يعني يزيدوا في انه يصير عندنا شباب واعي دارس والاعمال التطوعيه. بس لو نيجي نحكي هسه بالنسبه للمنح او للشباب، بيحكوا لنا حتى لو ما اخذنا منح العمل عجبنا، لانه بلامس شعورنا، بلامس تطلعاتنا كشباب اردني، انه احنا بدنا نطور بلدنا باي وسيله بغض النظر عن المنح.
شاركوا.
ممتاز. وبس كنت حابه اضيف شغله. لكل حضور، جهودكم فعاله، يا ريت تكونوا تساعدونا بقدر المستطاع. احنا بحاجه هلا لكم توفوا معنا حتى انه يعني نتجدد اكثر
ان شاء الله. ان شاء الله. شكرا. Just as a follow-up, Fadi, in the West, when the private sector gets involved in social causes, sometimes they're met with a lot of skepticism and massive skepticism and ulterior motives. For example, if you have an oil company that's trying to help out with environmental issues, their purpose is sometimes brought under suspicion. Have you faced this kind of skepticism, and is it any different from the skepticism that's faced in the West?
Massive skepticism. My friends here didn't accept me early on in the community, but I am proud that they feel probably that I am, and we are, meaning the institution, we are part of the community, we are ingrained in them. The skepticism came in, who are you, why are you coming here, we're neglected. I mean, government doesn't come here. Why would somebody from the private sector want to give his money, and what do you expect in return? The only group that is active over there is an ideological group. And then we question how the gap was filled by people that expect something in return from the community. So we came with an apolitical agenda, and we said, we're here to give back, and we're here to empower you at the end of the day, because we're here to make our role obsolete. Because once they're empowered, we will need to move on. I mean, if we, at the end of the day, if they are going to feel that we are going to be continuously needed in the community, well, it's not going to work. So skepticism was all over the place. That private sector, why here? What do you want in return? People questioned that because part of the area is a refugee camp. That we were told that we might be Zionists. It might be an American conspiracy. This is money laundering. You name it, and they, what I love about them is they say it to your face. No, they tell you, one guy came to me, I said, I know where your money is from. It's American banks. They came here and they were we were attacked in mosques. I need to tell you that. And government was skeptical, I should say. Government was skeptical, still skeptical. We don't get the tax breaks. By the way, we just got a letter from the Ministry of Finance refusing to give us a tax break on the money that is being given to the community. Fine. We're still going to give whether government likes it or not, or whether the community likes it or not, or whether the people that question our motives or not, we're there. We finally, by the way, found a modus operandi between us and the organizations that are working there, that this is community work. Whatever they're doing, we're doing. It's the same story at the end of the day. But I also need to say that part of government is also cooperating with us. For instance, the school, it took us a couple of months to convince the school that we need to fix their school for free. And now we have about 6 schools. Once we proved that we were going to do it, 6 schools call us, the headmistresses call us actually now and tell us, can you come and fix our schools for us? And we don't only fix schools, we have extracurricular activities for the students, as you saw. So it's not only about infrastructure, it's about the infrastructure of the mind. And that is so essential. And the discussion groups that you heard about earlier today, one big story that we were told, and I'm sorry I'm taking too long, but I'll close here.
I have to interrupt you.
Please do.
Just keep going, I know.
One thing that we were told early on, that boys and girls are not going to be meeting in one room. That is the first condition that we were told, and the only place that boys and girls meet in that community is in our community center. And a political story. You dress as you like. You say whatever you want. This is about you. It's not about us. We're only making the facilitation process so that you come and tell your story to each other.
Speaking about the relationship between NGOs and the government, Your Royal Highness, as someone who has been involved in government and also has a lot of experience in the field of philanthropy, and with your organization being one of the oldest in the Middle East, 30 years old, are there certain lines that people involved in philanthropy shouldn't cross when it comes to politics?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إن تبدوا الصدقات فأنعما هي وإن تخفوها وتؤتوها الفقراء فهو خير لكم ويكفر عنكم من سيئاتكم والله بما تعملون خبير. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. If ye disclose acts of charity, even so it is well. But if you conceal them and make them reach those really in need, that is best for you. It will remove from you some of your stains of evil, and Allah is well acquainted with what ye do. Alms are for the poor and the needy, and those employed to administer those alms, for those whose hearts have been recently reconciled to the truth, for those in the cause of Allah, and for the wayfarer. Thus is it ordained by Allah, and Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. Your Majesty, as far as I can tell, charity should go where it is needed. And according to the instructions we have received from God Almighty, it says who are those who need charity. The poor, those in need, those whose hearts are reconciled to the truth, and also those in bondage and in debt and in the cause of Allah. So therefore, any act that can further those aims and those aspirations is doable and within the realm of charity work. As you know, Your Majesty, the fourth pillar of Islam is zakat, which is almsgiving. And when you started your comments, you talked about charity and philanthropy. And I can't see any separation between the two, because philanthropy definitely gives a long-standing and strategic outlook on charity that makes charity viable for a longer period of time. And this is what the King Faisal Foundation has tried to do since its establishment a little more than 30 years ago. Coming from an interview that the late King Faisal gave, his last interview actually, in which he was asked, what do you foresee for Saudi Arabia in the future? And he said, I see Saudi Arabia as a wellspring for humanity. And when he died, God bless his soul, his children decided to establish the foundation on those principles. So it is in terms of education, it is in terms of building schools and hospitals, it is in terms of almsgiving, charity, food, medicine, clothes. All of these acts have to be encompassed within the framework of charity work. NGOs, wherever they may be, are definitely within the realm of almsgiving and charity, as long as what they do is beneficial to mankind. And there is no distinction, Your Majesty. I think this has to be made, as far as Muslim thinking is concerned, between charity for Muslims and charity for non-Muslims. It should cover all of those in need, regardless of their origins or creed or their color. And alhamdulillah, as far as the King Faisal Foundation is concerned, the main principles that the late King put for us on the issue of being the wellspring for humanity is being done now through a university, a high school, and a research center, and a scholarship program for students, and grants for in more than 35 countries throughout the world, as well as in Saudi Arabia. And it has also, fortunately, set a standard for others to follow, and we see more such foundations. And today, of all days, when we're talking about philanthropy, the good news that Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid has established a fund of $10 billion for the benefit of the Arab world, that is something that should be applauded and recognized by everybody.
So my question about the relationship between NGOs and politics and government. For example, an examples of Bob Geldof at one point didn't think that the president should run for re-election, as a result caused demonstrations in the country. Are there certain lines that philanthropists should not cross when it comes to politics? And anyone could feel free to answer this question. I think it's a very important question.
May I say that it depends what you mean by politics, Your Majesty. In today's world, I think when you say politics that has to do with raising the living standard of people, or providing education for the needy, or a hospital that may meet the requirements of a community, or any of such activities, it could be part of a political program. If you will excuse me for saying so, but most politicians in the world, in whichever country, would like themselves to be recognized as having either initiated such programs, either through government activity or on their own, or take credit for such programs, as Mr. Geldof has done in parts of the rest of the world, and politicians have attached themselves to Mr. Geldof's activities. It could come from the heart, definitely, and that's all and good. But I can't help but feel that there are some other aspirations as well than simply doing good, as my brother here, Ghandour, said, and feeling comfortable and going to bed at night with an easy heart.
At the other end of the spectrum, of course, we have sometimes situations where this social work is actually used just as a cover to further some political agendas, and that's something that we have to watch out for.
That's what we have to watch out for, yes.
And I want to pick up on one of the ayat that you read, fi surah, that says, and maybe Omar, you could answer this, that you can give in public or in secrecy. Now, contrary to the Western culture where people give openly and like to be acknowledged, in the Arab world we find that people prefer not to be acknowledged and almost to give in secrecy. Now, do you think that if people were to give more openly, that this would create more of a robust philanthropic environment in the Arab world?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's true anymore, that we don't like to give in public. People are becoming more and more conscious of where the money's come from and where it's going to go. And increasingly we're finding that people who want to, for example, give funds to the Emirates Foundation are quite happy to have that publicized in a way. And not only publicized, they're actually very happy to get involved in working out programs with us and setting agendas as well.
And does it encourage others then to give? There's this public acknowledgement?
I think absolutely. And I can't help thinking that perhaps what's happening in Dubai is in some way not a reaction, but a response in a way to what the Emirates Foundation has done as well. Of course, we're looking forward to working with them, and we applaud their huge endowment.
Because what we're concerned with is not just individual giving, but the creator of giving. And that's something that I think is still at its infancy in the Arab world. And I heard you once say that you're not concerned with individual volunteering, but creating a culture of volunteering. How do you go about doing that in your foundation?
Well, I think actually, there's much less work for us to do than we initially thought. We just established a national volunteer program in the Emirates, and we were overwhelmed with the response. Young men and women, kids from the age of 7 all the way up to 35, rushing to us with their details, with their enthusiasm, to get involved with projects wherever we could offer them. And in fact, now our problem is to actually try and find enough opportunities for them to put their energy into. We've been continually surprised, and I was particularly pleased to see the volunteers who spoke here today. It's something wonderful to see these young men and women really breaking all of the traditional stereotypes that we have in the Arab world, and I can't help thinking also that they shouldn't be seen as a threat. They should be seen as a tremendous opportunity, and it's up to us to begin to create structures for them, and that's exactly what they're looking for. These are their words. Thank you for creating a structure for us to actually begin to use our energy.
Well, as you know, 50% of the Arab world is under the age of 20, and that presents us with a great opportunity for a lot of energy that if given the right structures, as you said, could be harnessed in the right way. Now, Barbara, in your center is very involved with basically framing this whole philanthropic field and doing a lot of research and data gathering, providing, if you will, proof of concept for civic engagement. Is the Arab world just made of a few exemplary examples as the ones that we've heard, or is there a real movement in this field?
Well, our center is very new. We've only had our doors open for 1 year, but we spent a year prior to that taking a look around the region. Mm-hmm. And we were struck at what I think you could almost call a phenomena of interest in institutionalizing giving. Mm-hmm. This has always been a generous region, and both Christians and Muslims give as part of being a good person and being as part of their devotion. But what was new and interesting to us was the readiness to form organizations, to bring people's resources together, and to somehow think about being more effective. And I think there is every week or every month some new organizations sprouting up. And in each Arab country, they take slightly different forms because historically and in terms of legal structures, the environments are different. So we saw a moment in which we can catalyze and synergize some of that by simply sharing best practices, documenting and getting the word around. And I couldn't agree more with Omar, who says that a lot of this is being driven by young people. They are calling upon our generation to do more for them, to provide them with experience. And the skills of volunteering or of being a good citizen are not just the kind of thing I think we wake up overnight and decide we're going to practice. They require structure, as you were saying. We need to help kids learn how to form teams, organize committees, plan and carry out and analyze and think about mistakes and how they correct them. And it doesn't have to start big. I think one of the problems that I notice moving around the Arab world is how much we love to criticize things at the national level and talk about politics. Mm-hmm. But the same people that spend quite a bit of time doing that are ignoring problems right in their neighborhood or in their backyard where they could begin to come together and form those building blocks of experience and skills.
Well, it looks like we have the right ingredients for a thriving philanthropic movement. We have the youth, we are providing the structures, but I think in addition to that, what can governments do to provide more incentives for organizations to become involved? For example, many companies give because of tax breaks. In the GCC, where income tax is very low or almost non-existent, what incentives could there be to create the right environment for organizations to be motivated to give? And
I think governments can show encouragement in public displays of support for these organizations. An example in Saudi Arabia is the participation, for example, of the king and the crown prince in certain ceremonies that the King Faisal Foundation undertakes, whether it is the King Faisal Prize that is given on an annual basis in various fields, that includes prizes in sciences and medicine, which bring recipients from all over the world, along with Islamic disciplines and Arabic literature, and the King Faisal International Prize for Service to Islam. The king or the crown prince attends these ceremonies and gives credence and importance to these ceremonies that highlight the activities of the foundation and bring attention to its activities, and that definitely has a ring effect on the rest of society, because the leadership is seen as recognizing that kind of work. And there are other ways of doing that, maybe not tax incentives, but perhaps even participating with the foundation in certain projects that bring good and so on. to a community. All of these things can invigorate and support the activity.
Omar, you wanted to add something?
One of the key things that we find, even though my board is essentially half of the cabinet, we discovered that we need an NGO law that actually allows for all of these organizations that we want to support to actually exist legally. And so currently what we're doing is trying to adopt these organizations so that they have some kind of legal framework. But going down the road, you really need to think about having an impersonal system for developing civil society, as I think we're talking about.
Perhaps, Your Majesty, there's one other thing that government can do, or frankly any very large foundation with a very large endowment, and that is to encourage collaboration around key projects. One of the things that I find interesting about the philanthropic world is there's a lot of competition, actually. There's competition for funding. There's competition for programs, whose program is more inspiring than the other. Of course, a little competition is a good thing because it inspires people to performance. But on the other hand, it also is true that sometimes better results are achieved when people collaborate and leverage off of each other's activities. I think that is, in large measure, one of the secrets of the success of the Jordan Education Initiative. And so I think government and big foundations can encourage collaboration, can encourage people to leverage each other's work.
Well, in many cases in the Arab world, you find that there's competition betwing the NGOs and the government.
Yes, of course.
And that's an issue to look into. And actually, no matter how large the NGO sector is, we find that they are dwarfed by the spending, that the welfare spending by the government. Is it realistic for us to expect governments to give funding to NGOs to carry out projects instead of them executing projects themselves? For example, Fadi, you were talking about with the Ministry of Education, you're offering to fix a school, a public school. So you would think that the government would be welcoming of such an initiative. So is it realistic for us to expect government to be more hands-off and really sort of empower NGOs such as yours to move forward?
I think absolutely. I think in Jordan there is that tradition of incredible cooperation and work between the NGO sector and government. In fact, the Ministry of Planning now does a lot of its developmental work in poverty pockets in Jordan through NGOs, and that's what empowers these NGOs and makes them and gives them the experience in actually going out and doing it and building their capabilities and capacity building. So government in Jordan is developed enough and I think is aware enough and mature enough to get out of that process and allowing NGOs to do it. What was different with us is that we're a strange creature for them because we're private sector, and the private sector is continuously questioned with its motives. No matter what you do, there must be something that you're hiding behind your intentions of why you want to give. So we're not an NGO, we're just a bunch of 6 or 7 private sector people that want to do good. And that is just simply not a bit alien. Do good meaning in an activist way, not only in a charitable way where we're giving money to NGOs and sitting back and
it's more involved
and again feeling good about it. No. We decided that we want not only to give our money, but to give our skills. A lot of the things that we do in that community is bringing our skills, allowing them to bringing jobs to the people that actually the volunteers and the people that get scholarships. We do job placements for them. We teach them how to do interviews. We teach them how to do their CVs. We give them internships. It's more
about capacity building,
and empowerment. At the end of the day, again, development should not be left to government and government alone because government does not always know best.
In fact, sometimes it's better to give to organizations that specialize in certain things, and that's personally been my experience. So if you have an organization that's been involved in working with orphans, for example, they'll probably do a better job at running an orphanage than the Ministry of Social Development, if you will. And as you know, in the Arab world, there are a lot of complaints and criticisms directed towards government and towards leaderships, etc. And there's always a quest for democratization. I feel that building a strong civil society paves the way for that. If you have an empowered civil society, then that lessens the role of government and increases decision-making to the people, and therefore moves us towards more democratic practices.
Your Majesty, I must tell a story that occurred the first time I came to Jordan for the very first regional World Economic Forum that was held here. It was before this beautiful conference center was built. We were in the tent.
And the air conditioning
It was a little hotter. But I recall being on a panel, and the panel was discussing, among other things, the politics of the region, and this was in 2003, so there was much to discuss. And at the end of the panel, we all walked off, and I had noticed during the panel that there was a security guard standing, listening very intently. And when we went back into the green room, I said to him, I introduced myself and said, you know, I noticed you were listening, and he told me a little bit about himself. He was Egyptian, and he had come here. And I said, well, what did you think about this discussion? And he said something very wise, I think. He said, you know, we talk a lot about politics, and politics is very important. But in the end, it's all about economics. Mm-hmm. And what he was talking about, of course, was, to your point, politics is easier if there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. Opportunity exists if people have capacity. It really is, I think, the difference between charity and activism is money and time and people focused on building capabilities so that people can create their own opportunities and have the confidence and the empowerment and the enablement to do so. And so I think he said something very smart. It really is all about economics, and government can help, the private sector can help, private individuals can help, but I think we have to focus our efforts on creating opportunities and creating skills and capabilities that are sustainable.
Carly, if you'd share with us your personal experience moving from a corporation that was obviously for-profit, focusing on the bottom line or maximizing shareholder returns, to being in the field of civic activism and engagement. What was that transition like for you? And do you feel that you could do more in the NGO realm rather than the corporation?
Well, certainly there are differences between being in the not-for-profit world or the NGO world and the for-profit world. I had a very strong view as a chief executive that it was in our company's enlightened self-interest to be engaged in communities and to help build capacity. And one of I have taken many of the lessons that we learned in that work into my work today. So for example, one of the lessons we learned that my colleagues here also know is that you cannot go into a community and impose goals and objectives. The community must understand and develop its own objectives and own those objectives. Secondly, we learned that skills, particularly management skills, are as important sometimes in a community as money. How are goals established? How is progress measured? How are constituencies formed to deliver against those objectives? Those are management skills, and so sometimes the most important thing that can be given is not lots of money, but people to actually go in and help build those capabilities. So the point I'm trying to make is many of the lessons that we learned, that I learned personally, being engaged in community and capacity building as a corporate executive, I've taken into the private world. I guess the other thing that I would say is, and I could tell so many stories to illustrate this, but we've seen many of them in the film that we just saw. One of the very important things that I think anyone who is passionate about this needs to really believe, and we see it demonstrated over and over again, is that every single individual has enormous potential. It really doesn't matter how poor they are. It doesn't matter where they live. None of that matters. Every individual has incredible potential. And so I think applying even little bits of money, little bits of time, as well as billions of dollars of money and years of time, I think if that money and time is focused on unlocking potential of individuals and building capacity that is sustainable, that's a worthy goal.
It's all about just giving opportunity.
And creating opportunity.
Creating opportunity. And, you know, over the past years, we've actually seen so many changes in the relationship between NGOs and the private sector. They used to view each other with suspicion, and now they're realizing that they have a strategic interest in working together, that they can both benefit from one another. And we've seen people like yourself moving from the private sector into the NGO sector and from the NGO sector into the private sector. They never would have imagined working together, but then now it's happening. And also recently we've seen a trend of hybrid organizations that are neither public organizations nor private sector, nor are they NGOs. They are organizations that are born out of a sense of social purpose as well as financial promise. And, you know, I think we would hope that we would see those kinds of organizations emerging in our part of the world. But on that note, I think let's open the floor to take some questions from the audience. Anybody would like to direct any questions? Please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Herman Uzcategui, and I'm here representing Starbucks Coffee Company. And this discussion has been fascinating, because in Starbucks, we developed a business model that managed to do well while doing good. And some of these discussions we're having here are very close to our heart. We've been able to, in a very relatively short period of time, our company was founded, to create a business model based entirely on people. And Carla, you commented about the relationship between the private sector and the citizen sector, because I believe that in addition to the public sector, the private sector, there is a sector racing very fast, and is the citizen sector, social entrepreneurship, and many other things. So just wanted to share with you that the success we have been able to expand in different parts of the world has been linked to one component, and is the component of people. Everything that we do has been related to people, and within the company we say that we are not in the coffee business, but we are in the people's business serving coffee. And this is from selecting a partner.
Do you have a question?
Well, the comment is...
Or are you just promoting Starbucks?
No, I'm not, my intention is not promoting Starbucks, but adding a comment to the panel that a company that has been able to create a different business model that could be used as a reference for the discussion. I just wanted to make a comment. Thank you for the opportunity.
I think, hello. I think now, after this advertisement, I think you should distribute some coffee for all of us now. Thank you.
Samar?
Thank you, Your Majesty. Samar H.R.H. Hassan, Mahara consultancy firm. I have a question. Actually, it's a comment and a question. From what we are seeing about how important charity, philanthropy, and giving back to the society, when I see the new generation, I don't see they have it within themselves as much as we do. And it's a question that I would like to address to the panelists. What would be your advice to the ministries of education to do in the education system now, so that they can really build that feeling within the students? Some private schools, they do some social activities to encourage the students to do some social work, but it's not yet integrated. And the young generation are so busy with several things. They are distracted with so many things that they don't really have it within themselves to help their societies.
Fadi?
Thank you.
Your Highness?
I think it's important to remember in our part of the world the historical tradition for almsgiving and all of the charitable works. At one time, just as an example, making pens was financed by charities in the various towns, whether in Damascus or Baghdad or other towns in the Arab and Muslim world. And it was within the structure of the society that doing good was something that is rewarding, not just in the afterlife, but even in the community. I think since the Second World War, with the introduction particularly of the new educational curricula that spread throughout the Arab world in particular, much of that history and tradition and so on was either neglected or removed from practice. But I would agree to both my neighbors on the right and the left that the young people today are much more engaged in giving of themselves rather than simply in terms of financial contribution, as we see these two young people who have contributed in the projects here in Jordan. And you see this throughout the Arab world. I can speak for Saudi Arabia. We have a women's college in Jeddah that is part of the structure of the King Faisal Foundation, but financed with the inheritance of the late Queen Effet, where the young girls in that college are engaged in the society much more than the older generation that preceded them 20 years ago or 15 years ago, who were much more laid back and relaxed than this young generation that is coming up now in their teens and early 20s. They want to give, and they want to feel that they are participating in and sharing in the society.
Thank you. Barbara?
I heard of a lovely example in Kuwait where a woman was concerned that in her children's school there was very little of this sort of social responsibility being taught. So she got permission, I think it was a 3rd or 4th year class, to challenge the children to go home and collect all of the spare change out of their parents' pockets, their neighbors' bedroom dresser drawers, and bring those into class. And the response was tremendous. These kids brought in so many coins that sort of physically they couldn't figure out how they were going to put them all together and move them out of the room. But then it was a chance for the children to think about, okay, what do we want to do with the money we've collected? Where could we make the most good? Where could we really make a difference? And so I think that the curricular interventions can be simple, they can be fun, and the lesson becomes doing good feels good. It's not just an obligation, it feels good. The other thing I would just mention is that there's a wonderful business opportunity, I think, for the private sector to think about our unemployed graduates and perhaps create volunteer opportunities for them to solve a social problem, but to get a little bit of experience in the world that they could put on their CVs, they make some contacts. It might be the jumping off place to that first job, and this could be a wonderful learning opportunity as well.
Fadi, still want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that the minute it's the absence of platforms that allow people to come and volunteer. The minute we opened a youth center in Jabal al-Nadif, we can't, I mean, not only the kids that get that scholarships come back to volunteer. It is now, it's a center, people come just because we're there and they have a chance to come and volunteer to work in their community. And this is about volunteering for you. There is nobody that is more interested, by the way, in working in their community than the people of the community. So it doesn't take me to teach them, it takes me to, me meaning the institution, to tell them, here's a platform for you, come and you can volunteer. At the same time, our kids in the more affluent areas need to do, we need to do a better job with them in teaching them how to volunteer and to understand that there are people out there that are on the margins and they're not all well off like they are. And I have a problem with my children volunteering, so I need to do a lot of work internally. I think a lot of us in West Amman need to do the same thing.
So it's about teaching the values, providing the venues
Yeah, I mean,
and the platforms, and they probably, yes, Amar.
I'd like to come to the defense of young men and women. I think we have to have a little more faith in them, and that's what's going to really open up possibilities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Actually, I would like to give an example of one of the partnership that we did, United Nations, private sector, government, non-governmental organization, and volunteer. And when we established the e-village in Jordan, it was one of its kind in Jordan. And we launched it at the partnership of Her Majesty Queen Rania. And we have a lot of volunteers, and all of them young. We have United Nations volunteers, more than 20. In addition to this, we are serving 11,000 people in both Lib and Bleih. It's a community e-village beside Madaba. And what we did, we renovated the whole building, the old buildings in the community, and we established a lot of community centers. Among these, radio station community centers and Cisco academies, Microsoft academies, radio film club, etc. So it's an example in Jordan that we did, and I believe that we have to encourage the young people all the time to work on this issue. Thank you.
We have a question back there. She's been raising her hand for a long time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Abu Sulaiman, Kingdom Foundation. I have a question for Mrs. Ibrahim. At our foundation, we did a study that showed that 70% of giving in the Arab world is done on an individual basis, which means not an institution. It also means it's not counted. And I'm not counting the recent $10 billion that was before. But I just wanted to ask you, from your center's point of view, have there been any kind of studies that show how can we harness that kind of giving into a more institutionalized form?
Good question.
Yeah, very good question. I think some giving will always remain individual because of the religious obligations of zakat. But we could certainly be thinking more creatively about how zakat funds are used. We heard from His Royal Highness about wayfarers, for example, being a category that deserve to receive zakat funds. Well, recently in Egypt, there's been a group lobbying to receive a fatwa that refugees would begin to qualify as wayfarers because, of course, this is a huge problem in so many of our countries. So creativity, I think, is one of the ingredients that we're looking for. But I'm finding that spontaneously, there's a certain kind of individual who, after a certain period of time, wants to become more effective and wants to perhaps think about a legacy after they're gone. And for that individual, institutionalizing their giving makes sense. And it might be an endowment, it might be a foundation, it might be something operational, it might be grant making. And I would make a plug for anyone in the audience thinking about forming foundations that we need asset-bearing organizations that pass through their funds to other worthy citizen organizations, not that every foundation does all of their activities through their own mechanisms.
We're running out of time, so I'll take maybe just one more question, but it's got to be a question, not a comment. You in the back there, you've been very determined. No.
So hello, Andreas Heineke, Dialogue in the Dark, a social enterprise, and I have a real question. Does social entrepreneurship plays a role in Jordan, and is it on the track to work with Ashoka or with Schwab Foundation?
Yes.
Back there. The questions are not directed to me, I'm only moderating.
Sure. Simple question, simple answer.
I'm on a break today.
Well, thank you. I totally agree with you, Your Majesty, about that the NGO and private sector are working more in harmony nowadays than ever. But I think, or I believe that we should move beyond this. My suggestion or question, I hope you agree with me, why don't the private sector groups, let's say, use the NGOs as a tool of change in the local community or even as a national wide? Let's say since the private sector has the money and we all know that the money talks. Okay, let the money talks, but let the NGO works by let them give them the support or the platform so they can work and change using the young people, like a couple of youth. We have just heard them. Just like what Mr. Omar said, that we should be some more faith in our young people, because we can expect more from them, and I'm sure that we can have a lot of them. Thank you.
Well, collaboration, I think, between sectors was something that was discussed, and I think we're moving in that direction. While everybody's enthusiastic about, okay, we have to, by popular demand.
I'm Landrum Bowling. I was for some years head of the Lilly Endowment when before the Bill Gates days, was the third largest foundation in the world. And I've had the great honor of being one of the many advisors that His Royal Highness Prince Turki consulted prior to the formation of the King Faisal Foundation. So I have a great sense of identity with this gathering and the wonderful initiative that Your Majesty has carried here. I learned something out of the foundation world that I would like to share with you. One thing that I discovered very soon after I got into this role of being a philanthropoid was that no matter how much money you had available, and we had some billions of dollars available, there's never enough. 95% of your requests would have to be turned down. So how do you help to expand the funds that are available? And that's what I think is the great challenge to us. The philanthropic pie is not a limited area. It is expandable infinitely. And it seems to me that part of our job in the philanthropy field is to encourage other people to get involved, to increase the number of foundations, the number of NGOs. And part of this, and I think perhaps the most useful thing that I did in my days of being head of a philanthropy, was to set up a program for the training of NGOs in how to raise money. Literally guiding them. Many times we'd say, we have to tell you no for your request, but we'll make available to you an advisor to show you how you can strengthen your boards and increase the funds that flow to you. This is an enormous, universal kind of challenge, and we have many ways of expanding the people who participate in it.
While everybody's excited about raising their hands, I just want to ask very quickly, how many of you would like to be involved in social causes or in some kind of charitable work? How many are currently involved in such activities? So we're preaching to the converted then. I think we have to wrap up this session, and I just want to thank our very distinguished panelists for your enlightened input, and just to say that, civic engagement is good at all levels. At the global level, I think it paves the way for real multiculturalism, for societies reaching out to one another. At the national level, I think it really provides the human resources for vibrant civil society and for social cohesion, so that money is not just concentrated among a small group of people. And at the personal level, I think, I've seen so many very successful CEOs, people who have made so much money, and yet they're always very enthusiastic about talking about their social projects. They never talk about their business. They never talk about the companies they're running or how much profit they made. They talk about the little school that they fixed or the little center that they built to help women and children. That's what gets them going. And I think that's what gives people the sense of fulfillment. And they're not mutually exclusive. You can do business and do good in this world. And I think that provides a perfect balance for everybody. So get out there and do it.
He's a very experienced fellow.
I know.
When are you leaving?
Not till Monday morning.
Monday morning?
Yes.
Maybe we'll see you tomorrow.
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope so. Thank you.
I am going to custody for a social. You don't have your phone. Okay, so I'll have to sit you off. I'll sit you off.